I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the upgraded for 2021 Toyota Supra. The Toyota Supra has been much maligned by car enthusiasts since it launched a couple of years ago. Why? Despite wearing a design that's clearly intended to reference the previous Mark IV Supra, the Mark V Supra is a collaboration with BMW. And collaboration's probably the wrong word because BMW really did most of the job here. We've got a BMW engine, a BMW sourced gearbox from ZF. We've got a huge amount of BMW stuff on the interior. The sorts of things that Toyota did for this car are really ride and handling based, and I make it sound like that's not important. In actual fact, the way a sports car steers and rides is central to how it actually feels on the road. And we'll talk a bit about the Supra's characteristics in that sense when we take this white GTS with 280 kilowatts of power out for a drive shortly. The first point I wanted to cover off in today's video though was just how the Supra has been received, because I think that it's almost become fashionable for car journalists in some parts of the world to dump on the Supra for clout. Because yes, look, let's be honest, Toyota GR probably could have done this car themselves if they wanted to. Toyota has pretty deep pockets, but they didn't, and what we ended up with is a small, relatively light, wide, securely set 3-litre inline 6-cylinder petrol non-hybrid rear-wheel drive sports coupe. Not really a recipe that we see a lot of in the world at the moment. And I think it's important for us to take an honest look in today's video as to whether the Supra really is shit, which some people claim it is online, or whether there's actually a pretty great sports car lurking under this skin that is worthy of consideration, even if we sort of ping Toyota on taking an easier route rather than a harder route. So I want to take a critical view, a more objective view in today's video that doesn't proceed from the basis that just because there's a BMW B58 under that bonnet, this car is necessarily crap. I'm bringing an open mind to it. I hope you are too. Before we get started, hit subscribe down there, help get us to 100K. When it comes to criticizing the BMW origins of the Supra, I don't think anyone has necessarily a massive complaint about BMW's B58 engine being used in this car, because it is a great engine, sharing a wheelbase, a rear-wheel drive layout with the Z4. I mean, these are sort of basic things that aren't offensive to people that like sports cars. I actually think the bigger problem is probably the lazy stuff, which you can easily see comes from BMW. It didn't have to. Toyota could have done something about it, and a lot of that is found here in the cabin, where it's just dripping in parts taken from BMW indiscriminately. So the iDrive system, the shortcuts for the radio, the climate control, the iDrive rotary dial down here, the steering wheel layout and buttons, the stalks, the door handles, the window controls, the seat controls, you know, it is all BMW. Now that's no bad thing, because BMW actually makes, well, probably the best all-round interiors in the industry in terms of quality and functionality, and the Supra gets to benefit from all that despite being a Toyota. It's just that when your eye is constantly seeing stuff which is like BMW, 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 you stop thinking, oh, this is a Toyota, and you start thinking, wow, this new BMW coupe is really nice. So I guess that's an interesting effect, and I think that that's a fair complaint that people have. But just putting that aside to 1 second, the actual interior of this car itself, assessing it objectively, is good. Now, it gets unique seats from Toyota. These seats look pretty cool. You can get them in this sort of blood red color, or just more traditional and conservative black. They hold you in. They still have BMW-esque adjustable side bolsters. Now, the seats and the car itself, I don't think it's really cut out for people with large frames, because the pedal box here, particularly on right-hand drive, is pretty narrow. Your knees are up against the center console and the door a lot of the time. It's tight, but it certainly feels focused, and I love this narrow letterbox aperture of the front window. Is it great for visibility? No. Does it look cool? Absolutely. You really feel like you're in kind of a fighter jet down here or something like that. It looks awesome. Now, again, the tech coming from BMW, at least that means it really works. And I like it better than most Toyota systems. We've got a rotary dial, so it's easy to use on the go. The screen itself is high resolution and crisp, although it's unusually dark, and this is sort of the 5th or 6th Supra that we've tested that's had a really dark central screen. Climate control is easy to use, we've got heated seats, and then the Supra has these sort of digital dials with an analog tack surround. They do look cool. They can't actually do much, but at least it looks cool, I suppose. We have a JBL sound system that works fine. Is it as good as the Harman Kardon you get in a BMW? No, it isn't, but it's serviceable. We've got memory seats, we've got a whole bunch of stuff like that. What we don't have is back seats. The Supra is a traditional 2-seat coupe only. Personally, I think that clarifies matters. You can't give your group of friends too many lifts in this car. The person here in the passenger seat is going to love it though, because the ride and the handling of this vehicle is just excellent. And we'll come back to that after a short talk about the boot space and the running costs. Here around the back of the Supra, I think it's a pretty cool looking design, even in this basic white, although one of the best things about this car is you can get it in a range of really good colors. There's a particularly handsome navy that a friend of mine went for his own Supra. I know there's been a couple of fairly famous Supras out there, including one in matte grey, which you can still get on this car, which looks the business. Now, I'm not sure these blue and white Victorian slimline plates are the best to complement the car. I would just go with a full-size European plate, as the initial batch of Supra press cars actually used. As an Austrian vehicle, the European plates actually suit the back of the Supra quite well. A little GR badge down here reminding us that this is in fact the GR Supra, not the Toyota Supra. Now, opening the boot has to be done via the key fob, which is a BMW key fob, but with a slightly different button layout. The tailgate opens up nice and easily on gas struts, and it reveals a boot which is small but usable enough. 290 litres of boot space. You can see I've got my briefcase in here. I've also got both small and medium in terms of suitcases. So, you know, it's a 2-seater sports car. I don't think it has to have the practicality of a Kluger. For what it's meant to do, it's absolutely fine. Last thing before we drive the 2021 Supra is a chat about the running costs. Running most sports cars is an expensive affair, particularly if you intend to take it on track. And if you do intend to take a Supra on track, your budget for tires and brakes is going to be something which I can't give you an estimate for, but it does use fairly aggressive Michelin rubber, so there's that. If you only intend to use your Supra on the road, however, buying the Toyota Supra instead of, say, a BMW M440i or a Z4, which share very similar mechanicals to this car, is actually very smart, because firstly, the warranty on the Supra is 5 years with unlimited kilometers. Now, BMW only give you 3 years, so instead of paying them for an extended warranty, Toyota just throw it in. Similarly, servicing, Toyota's cap price servicing program applies to the Supra, just like any other Toyota. The services are required every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, but the first 5 only set you back $385 a piece, which is dirt cheap for a B58 BMW engine with this car's sophisticated mechanicals, a proper differential. This thing is properly cheap to service through Toyota. 5 years is just over $1,900 if my maths is correct. It does raise the question though, something that a couple of Supra fans have spoken to me about, is whether or not you'd prefer to have this car serviced by Toyota or by an independent BMW specialist, because of course the oily bits are basically BMW. Now, I don't want to suggest that Toyota techs haven't done all the requisite training to service a Supra, because they definitely have. Toyota's reputation for quality in Australia absolutely requires that sort of thing. But just keep in mind, if you want to take advantage of that dirt cheap servicing, this car has to be serviced alongside Corollas rather than alongside M3s. So I guess you probably understand what I'm trying to say. So let's take the Supra for a drive. Let's see whether or not it deserves that slightly maligned attitude that I think a lot of people have towards this car. Does it drive like a BMW? If you were blindfolded and driving it, well, I guess you shouldn't be wearing a blindfold, but you know, does it feel like a BMW from behind the wheel? Let's find out. So auto only, unfortunately. Technically they could do a manual. The cluster architecture platform does have manual gearboxes. The engine does have a manual gearbox that has been paired with it in the past. Not sure if there's anything at the moment which is sold with a B58 and a manual, but they could have done it. Either way, it's the ZF 8-speed torque converter automatic. It's the BMW B58 engine. All of that is pretty well known. Initially, it was 250 kilowatts of power and 500 newton meters of torque. And then pretty quickly, Toyota upgraded the Supra to 280 kilowatts of power and 500 newton meters of torque. But even when it was advertised in that lower state of tune, the Supra was already understating its power. I believe that to be the case as well in the 280 kilowatt version. That's classic BMW B58. However you look at it, it's a quick car. And this is, one of the world's best engine gearbox pairings, I reckon. And, it works a treat for the Supra. In the same way that it works a treat for everything they put this combination into. In other markets, there is a 4-cylinder version of the Supra with the B48 engine, BMW B48, 2-litre turbo unit, but we don't get that here in Australia. There's no messing around. It's just the full fat 3-litre straight 6 single turbo. And that means that the Supra is motivated really, really well. It never ever feels slow. There's always plenty of power, both off the line. It's quick if you can get traction to the rears, which is not always possible, and then rolling acceleration. It reminds me of a cruise missile, the Toyota Supra, because it absolutely just sits back on its haunches and goes. Feels absolutely fantastic when you just plant the boot. The transmission knows exactly what it's doing. It doesn't waste any time at all. Its reactions are, if not scientifically as good as a dual clutch transmission, the difference is as good as moot, I reckon, in the real world. It gets moving, you lift, there's a little crackle, subtle crackle on the overrun. It's actually a very sophisticated engine, this one, because it does have a few of those theatrics in terms of the noise, but it's never sort of overwhelming like it is on an AMG or a Hyundai i30N or something like that, which they always let you know they're out to play. With the Supra, you can have it if you want it. It's there for the taking, but you can also kind of settle in and drive it a bit more like a GT car. Apart from in one way, and that's that it's not especially refined in terms of road noise. It's pretty noisy on coarse chip, and we have a lot of that in Australia, so there's quite a lot of opportunity on country roads for the Supra to get pretty tiresome in terms of cabin noise. I think similar things can be said about the suspension. It's a settled car as long as the road is smooth, and Europe has a lot of that where the Supra was developed. Japan has a lot of that where it was also developed, but here in Australia and in a lot of other countries where B roads tend to be pretty pockmarked, the Supra does spend a lot of its time bouncing around at the rear. The rear spring rates are probably not the best fit for Australian roads. It just keeps you on your toes a little bit, because I think like mid-rebound, the Supra can get a little bit skittish at times, but that's really the only instance I can name where the Supra does feel skittish, because actually the product of the almost square set 4 corners of this car and the wheelbase length and the width of it, it's a wide car, means that it has astonishing mechanical grip, this vehicle. On a smooth or a semi-smooth piece of tarmac, you can commit at a serious pace in the corners in the Supra, and it just feels foursquare and secure and tied down on the tarmac. You can carry real speed through the corners, and it turns out that you want to, because the Supra is balanced and poised, but it also steers beautifully, and that's because Toyota did the power steering tune for the Supra, not BMW, and so the steering could not feel more different than the Z4. Now, look, it might not be the most charitable of formulations, but I have described the Z4's steering as like stirring cake batter. You're turning something, but it's kind of buried in this thick, gluggy mess. There's something that isn't right about the Z4 steering, and thankfully Toyota managed to protect themselves from that influence, because the Supra steering is fine. Not the last word in steering, but it's quick, it's neither too light nor too heavy, it's direct, there's some communication coming from the front wheels. It's exactly what you would want the steering to be like on, quite a powerful grand touring sports car. Not like cake batter, so that's good. And in actual fact, the handling, the steering, even the ride to a lesser extent, but particularly the handling and the steering of the Supra is nothing like the BMW Z4. Yes, they were developed together. One would not exist without the other, the makers tell us. But aside from the basic dimensions and hard points, the engine and the gearbox, and some other bits of hardware, the differential, the LSD, the character and the tuning is really different enough that, I don't think anyone who's driven both of the cars at length, like I've been fortunate to, would ever really describe this as like a BMW Z4 coupe, because it's absolutely not. And nor is the Z4 like a Supra convertible. They're just not interchangeable. It's just not really how it has worked out. Instead, this is the harder core vehicle, absolutely. The Z4 is definitely in the soft core camp, even though it too has 280 kilowatts of power in the M40i version. The Supra's got a significantly harder edge, and that makes itself known pretty much everywhere. It's not especially refined. It's not an Audi S5 substitute. That's a car where you can really settle down for the long haul, and it's what I would recommend if you want a slightly more cosseting experience in kind of a similar-ish form factor. Of course, that car has back seats. We don't have that here. And on the safety front, it's not as up-to-date as more recent BMW-derived products. We do have adaptive cruise control. We do have lane holding. We do have blind spot monitoring. We don't have a 360-degree camera in this car. We don't have BMW's assisted driving feature, which is kind of cut out of the Supra. We don't have wireless CarPlay, which I mentioned. There's a bunch of things which BMW obviously kept for themselves. The full semi-autonomous suite is one of them, but whether you even want all that stuff in a car like the Supra is questionable, I think, in the first place. So those are my impressions of the Toyota Supra. I think the message that I want to send is, particularly now that the Supra's got even more power, if you like this car, you buy it, because the Toyota Supra is so much fun to drive, and its fundamentals as a 6-cylinder rear-wheel drive sports coupe are all absolutely there. Phenomenal engine, great gearbox, limited slip differential, huge amounts of grip from both the chassis and the tires, better steering than its BMW counterparts. If you don't give a crap about this, the Supra should have been a homegrown Toyota kind of impression, then good for you, because you haven't been infected by, at times, fairly toxic car culture online. If, however, you do believe very strongly in Toyota's GR ethos of homegrown performance cars, that's absolutely fair enough, because Toyota has a storied reputation for doing its own thing. Both the previous Supras, the Sleekers, the new GR Yaris, which kind of flies in the face of the idea that Toyota couldn't have done the Supra themselves. So I guess I'm not trying to fence sit, I'm just saying that I understand where both camps are coming from. For myself, not really invested in fast Toyotas in a massive sense, I'd be fine driving this Supra. I think it's hilarious. I love the way it looks. The BMW bits don't bother me, but if they bother you, that's fine. You can let me know your view down below in the comments. You're absolutely welcome to flame me if you would prefer to do so. While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.